Good evening, everyone. We will call the October meeting of the Cleveland Heights Planning Commission to order. Thanks, everyone, for joining tonight. We'll just note in terms of attendance of the commissioners that Commissioner Miles is not present. Oh, she is coming in. Okay. So if she joins us, we'll just note that she joins us, that she has joined us. We have, I think that attached in the email, we did not have the September minutes. I saw the July. Okay, so let's hold off. We can always do that next month unless somebody saw the September minutes. Okay. All right, so that we're going to do a little bit. We're going to move the agenda a little bit as per request from staff. But before we do that, oh, here we have Commissioner Miles is here. Thank you. Let's ask our Assistant Law Director, anybody, staff, or any applicants here tonight, or any members of the public who might wish to speak. We'll swear you in or affirm you in now. Oh, so we. No, I think that's right. Okay, never mind. So we'll continue on. Yes, yes. So 2 notes on the agenda for tonight before we head to new business. One is that project number 25-21, that case has been withdrawn by the applicant. Is there anything staff wants to share with the commission as to why that was withdrawn or what we should expect for them to come back? Okay, so that is off the table essentially for now. Okay, great. And then similarly, we had as a tentative, because we wanted to be able to notice it, the preliminary review of the Severance Town Center proposed zoning text amendment and zoning map change. My understanding from watching the council meeting last night is that it was not presented to council to be able to be referred to us for this meeting. So we won't be doing that, but in lieu of that, I believe we have a presentation from Ryan Porter at MPACT. So Karen, did you want to provide any additional context on that? Okay. Yep. Ryan, can you hear us?
I can't hear Karen at all. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, her mic is not working. What she was doing was saying that it was time for you to speak. So
right, that's what I figured when everybody's looking to the left.
Yeah, and Ryan, I think that you have the ability to share your screen.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm gonna bring this up and I'm gonna go into present mode. Hopefully we're on the right spot. Okay. All right. I want to thank the commission for having me this evening, first and foremost. We have been working our butts off on this effort for the revitalization of Severance Town Center. It's been a couple months, several months since I've been in front of you all. So I appreciate the time tonight. So I just want to kind of recap where everybody kind of like overall situation, and then we're going to dive into some zoning concepts. So just to remind everybody, you know, we partnered with NAMDAR on this. We had a 20-month period to get all this stuff done. We are about 18 months into that 20 months right now. So a lot has gotten accomplished. We spent the first 9 to 12 months doing our recommended action plan, which was completed in January of this year. And then we spent kind of the first 3 to 4 months after that of the year working on our concept plan for the overall site. And then we started our zoning efforts. So in kind of, mid-year, we started writing the zoning code, and that's culminated into where we are today. And with kind of 4 months left till like mid-February left on my deal with NAMDAR, I don't believe I'm going to get everything I need to get it accomplished, meaning the zoning code and all the tax abatement structures. But I did want to try to get the zoning code, show them that we got the zoning code done before the end of the year. So, you know, we've been working real hard on getting this code written with staff. We think it's, you know, it's in a place where it's going to, you know, people are going to like it once we submit it next week. I know we're a little bit off on the calendar, as the chairperson mentioned. We were supposed to submit last week for this Monday, but we're going to be submitting next week for the council to receive on November 3rd. And then I was planning on coming to town for your next planning commission meeting, I believe, to go over any questions you have. But you should have it referred to you as the commission post Monday, November 3rd. So November 3rd, I'm going to be in town that Monday, where hopefully the city will accept the zoning code and then refer it out to you all. And then we have a whole kind of step of processes there. There's a public hearing that we're looking to schedule for around December 2nd, with the goal of trying to get all this completed by the end of the year. So I'm going to just kind of roll through where we are. Again, the area concept plan, some of you may or may not have seen this. It has not changed dramatically since I was presenting this to the city council. This is, you know, a large scale mixed use walkable development. This concept plan was pretty strategically developed by us, but I want to be 100% clear. We're not saying that this is exactly what's going to be built. And the zoning code that we're recommending for the city to adopt for this site is an optional overlay form-based zoning code. So it will sit on top of the S1 zoning that exists on this site and will not be an obligation of any property owners on this site to use. So they could use and stick with their S1 zoning, or they can opt into this new code. So it's optional, really important thing for people to understand, right? So we're not forcing the zoning on every property that sits within this red boundary, right? And that red boundary is bordered on the north side by Mayfield, on the west by Taylor, on the south by kind of the back lot lines with some buffer of the single family home neighborhoods to the south, and same with the east, okay? It'll have a buffer area to the single family home neighborhood that sits on the eastern side. And that will be the overall zoning boundary. But again, this will be an optional zoning that people can opt into or stick with their existing S1 zoning. And ultimately, this form-based zoning code will allow for people to develop certain uses under certain zoning regulations and form regulations, different heights, different amounts of standard as to what their frontage requirements are, whether they have to have ground floor commercial space, whether they don't. But that will be regulated on a block by block basis. And I'll get into that as we go through this presentation. But just because I have kind of the buildings set out the way they are set out right now, like we imagine phase 1A to be this kind of right-hand side of your screen, which is this corner up near the existing condo building just adjacent to City Hall. We imagine that being the first mover area of this project. But because we've designed concept plan as building A, B, C, D, E, how they're laid out, we're not saying that's exactly what building's going to be built, right? Ultimately, the building will go through a site plan approval process and an architectural design process, but the rules around each one of these blocks need to be followed as the form-based code calls for. But, you know, building A, B, and C might become a donut building and not be separated 3 buildings, or it might become 2 bar buildings along the 2 streets, right? So the concept plan is not directly required, right? Obviously, because I can't guarantee how things are going to be built, but the rules around the urbanity and the walkability that we're designing in the form-based code, you know, will force buildings to be set up at the street and parking to be hidden behind, and certain heights that'll be allowed, and certain typologies that will be around, and a certain amount of open space and civic space that's required, and a certain amount of parking. So we'll dive into those types of things. But again, this concept plan is a driver for us to how we could see the site getting developed over time. And eventually we think we're going to develop basically the entire east portion of the site from the north side to the south side of where the Walmart movie theater box is, because that's the least occupied area of the mall and the most available for development from a parking lot vacancy perspective. And then we imagine moving back up towards City Hall for kind of a second large phase of this project. To be clear, phase one alone, as programmed in this concept plan, could be 7 plus 10 years of development alone, because it's, that in and of itself is 700 to 800 units in just that area, right? Remember, this is a very large site. So like that, what I was showing you in phase 1A is like half the size of Van Aken, just that little section, right? Because this is a 50 plus acre site. So it is going to take a long time. This could be a 20 to 25 year build out. And it's definitely going to be a process. But again, we see transitioning from a large kind of phase one on the eastern corridor of the overall site to then transitioning to tearing down most of the main mall areas, hopefully moving the Daves into a new facility, and then building this kind of boulevard type Main Street area that starts at City Hall. And that would be kind of the phase two area, and then working our way towards the southeastern portion of the site for what we consider maybe a phase three area. And you'll notice that Home Depot is kind of sitting out there all on its own because we don't control that parcel. And it's very unlikely that that parcel changes over any sort of near term. That being said, again, the zoning overlay will sit on top of that Home Depot site. So should the value of this downtown become such that it makes sense financially for Home Depot to no longer be Home Depot, then they have the opportunity, and the owner of that site has the opportunity to opt into the zoning as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about form-based zoning, but we don't have enough time for me to like get into the nitty-gritty. But it is something that was built to oppose the traditional Euclidean zoning that we used for a very long time. And I'm sure like Bob and some of the people on your commission could even explain it even better than me. But as opposed to having uses that are segregated areas, here's a residential area, here's an industrial area, here's a commercial office area. Form-based zoning looks at putting those uses together and regulating the form of the buildings and the public space around them, right? So how do we create great place? And through our form-based zoning codes, which we've done very successfully in multiple communities, we create great place by regulating how the buildings address the curb and the public space, and what has to be for your civic space, and how high the building can go, and what the step backs are over a certain height, where the parking has to be hidden. So those are all the things that we regulate in the form-based zoning code, right? How much ground floor glazing do you have to have versus just having a blank wall? How much of that ground floor glazing has to actually be retail space, right? And regulating on different blocks that we see as more commercial and mixed use blocks versus more residential, walkable blocks, right? That are less mixed use in nature. So we regulate each one of these blocks with our form-based zoning code to allow for the types of development that create these great walkable places. But we are very, and I want to emphasize this, very flexible as to what uses can be put where. We have a use table that only has a certain amount of allowable uses, retail, office, residential. We allow for arts and cultural, institutional, some light industrial, but not heavy industrial, obviously. So if somebody wanted to have the empanada factory in the back of a mixed-use building with, office above it, that's allowed, right? But the front of the building might have to be a storefront where they sell the empanadas, right? So we're very flexible in uses so that the market can react to the uses that are most applicable. A lot of this program will be driven by residential, a combination of multifamily residential and for sale residential, with ground floor uses that drive those, right? So some activation on those ground floors, whether those be service uses or retail uses or restaurant uses. So again, we are looking to break ground kind of late 26, early 27. The first phase alone will probably be a 2 to 3 year build out. I'm thinking that's going to be in the kind of 200 to 300 unit range in multiple buildings and configurations, with somewhere in the range of kind of 5 to 15,000 square feet of ground floor commercial and retail space as part of that. Those are my conceptual plan numbers right now. But again, the concept plan is not necessarily directly connected to the code itself. So now I want to kind of like dive into some code stuff that's more regulated and detailed. So on your left-hand side of your screen, we have what's called our development standards. And so for each one of these development blocks, right? If a developer or an owner comes in to propose a project, what they can develop from a height perspective, right, is regulated partially by where they sit on the site, right? So we've regulated different areas, right? We've regulated zoning standard area number 1, standard area number 2, standard area number 3, and is also regulated by the size of their parcel. So the larger the parcel you have, the larger the development standard you can reach, right? So, for example, right, for development standard number 2, you can see that middle column, right? If you were to look in the SO1 district, for the SO1, which is our highest district, it's going to be the center core of our development of our downtown, where we want the highest buildings, not near, obviously, the outskirts where the single family homes are, right? So towards the center of the site where we think our main street's going to be. If you look at that development standard number 2, if you have a total site frontage of 100 feet or more and a site area of at least 10,000 square feet, you can build a building that's between a minimum of 3 stories and a maximum of 6 stories if you're in the SO1 district. So each one of these sites has a different development standard that attaches, again, to where they are on the site and how much site area they control, okay? Then I'm going to shift you kind of to the right side of the screen, and we talk about setbacks on the left side also. Like when you get over certain stories, you have to set the building back 12 feet to make a more walkable pedestrian feel that you're not in a cavern, right? So, we look at the kind of the width of the street versus the height of the building and what kind of setbacks will allow for the place to feel pedestrian oriented and human scale. If you look at the right-hand side, this is obviously super important. These are the program thresholds. So under our overlay zoning, we are proposing a maximum build out over this 20 to 25 year period of these uses, right? So for residential, we're proposing 3-phase thresholds, right? One is the first 850 units, the second is the next 1,000, and then third is 650. So for a total of 2,500 residential units that can be built over a 20 to 25 year period, as projected, around 100 units a year would be the max. We're not saying that all of that will be built. We're saying that is the cap that could be built under this overlay zoning code without any regulation changes having to happen if we were to get to that threshold and people still wanted to develop more. For the retail, restaurant, and entertainment, we're saying 175,000 square feet is the cap. For the office, professional, and medical service, we're saying 85,000 is a square foot cap. For the hotel and hospitality, 250 rooms, again, a cap. Arts and cultural, 50,000 square feet, a cap. Institutional, civic, and educational, 75,000, a cap. And light industrial, arts and production, 50,000, a cap. Now, where do we get these numbers from? We get these numbers from a combination of the residential market study that was commissioned by the city with us in a partnership, and also through our retail sales analysis, our office analysis, looking at what we believe healthy mixes in downtowns should be between these different uses, right? So that's how we come up with these caps in places that we work, and this is the recommended caps for Severance's zoning code, okay? I'm going to go to the next slide, and I will stop and come back to anything if people want me after, but I just want to kind of get through some stuff with you. All right, this is not showing up exactly how I wanted to. Okay, so this is really important. This is our regulating plan, okay? So if you can see this map, this is what I was talking about as far as blocks go. So if you can see all these numbers, right? 1, 2, starting in the upper left-hand corner, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. Those are our regulated blocks. So for our zoning code, we are imagining the street network to be this street network. So we've designed this street network. And the reason we designed the street network like this is because we actually took a lot of the right-of-ways and where the internal road networks exist in the mall, and we try to augment them as little as possible to turn them into a more walkable, pedestrian-oriented street grid, because there's a lot of infrastructure under those areas, right? So this project's going to be very infrastructure heavy, expensive, and infrastructure is always a really expensive thing. Moving roads, moving sewer, moving water, moving curbs, moving drainage. But we were able to kind of manipulate this such that we can have larger, kind of more boulevardy streets and more neighborhood streets and pedestrian ways that fit into the existing topography and infrastructure setup of the Severance Mall site over time, so that it fits a downtown development, right? But it's also taking advantage of the existing infrastructure. So there was a lot of work put into studying all that to get us to this place where we've set up these development blocks, right? And like I said, each one of these development blocks will have certain rules to the block, right? So if you look as an example on what we're calling Burger Boulevard, which is in the center, which we imagine to be like the main street of this downtown over time. And you look at block 12 as an example, right? If you can see that kind of red border on block 12, well, that red border says something. And what that says is that red border for that block on Burger Boulevard has to have X percentage, and I'm not gonna say the exact percentages because they're different for each one, of storefront glass, and X percentage of that frontage has to be publicly accessible retail or office space. And office has a lot of definitions on it, like service space, maybe it's an accounting office, maybe it's a lawyer's office, or retail, which could be restaurants or dry retail or any type of retail space, entertainment space, right? So we're regulating for that block's future development how much has to be storefront, how much frequent the entrances have to be, and how much has to be retail or active space, right? To create that walkability and that activity on the street. So each block will have different rules, and some blocks will have less requirements and some blocks will have more requirements based upon where we believe the urbanity should exist in more dense amounts and more mixed use amounts, or less, right? You can kind of see along Burger Boulevard, and it's hard to tell, that the darkest purple areas, right? So there's 3 shades of purple going on in this, right? There's along Burger Boulevard, the dark purple areas. Those dark purple areas are what we consider our SO1 district, where we can get our highest buildings. So the max height we have in our SO1 for development standard, remember we were looking at that 3, which is you have a 30,000 square foot site or larger. The highest you can go on a building there is 8 stories. I don't necessarily believe that the construction typology and the cost will allow for people to develop 8 stories for quite some time. But we wanted to kind of match the max heights that exist actually on site approximately with the existing buildings. And we thought that the core should have those tallest buildings. And then if you move out from that darkest purple to the next light purple color, those maxes are 5 stories. And then if you move even further to kind of the south end and the east side of the whole site, where it's the lightest purple color, those areas where you are adjacent mostly to single family homes and lower density, those areas are 3-story maximum, right? So we're using the concept of a transect, where the highest density is in the core and we work our way out to the lower density as part of our regulating plan and how we set up the zoning code. What else is on here? Street networks, there's certain green space areas that are pre-programmed. There's pedestrian ways that you see those greenways. Every street has a different typology. Every block has a different rules around it, as I said. So again, this is our regulating plan. All right, let me get to the next slide. Page down. Okay, so I just want to talk for a minute about, and I'm at 7:25, so I'm going to try to wrap up as quick as I can. Public frontages. So this is like a huge piece of our code, right? We regulate from the face of the curb to the street wall of your building what has to happen, right? What has to happen in your public frontage, which is the furnishing zone, which is the clearway zone for pedestrians to walk, which is a private frontage zone where you could have outdoor dining or whatnot, right? So all of our blocks and our streets and our frontages are very purposefully regulated depending on the place, right? You might be in a more residential area where you have a porch condition and you don't have to have obviously the same commercial frontage as you would on a main street, right? So we regulate all these things, and this is just an example of a public frontage diagram. Let's see, parks and open space, super important. Again, we're gonna have, like, our concept plan had about 5 acres plus of parks, and then more when we were thinking that, you know, Burger Boulevard could shut down on the weekends once the main street is built. But around 5 acres we had pre-programmed as kind of our thought as to, you know, frequent public programmed public civic spaces. We think it's really important that they need to be programmed and not just blank spaces that sit there and kind of create dangerous dark areas. Like, they have to be programmed civic spaces. But anyways, so the way we regulate this in the code is that we require every site from 15,000 square feet to 100,000 square feet, okay, to provide 10% of their site area as civic open space. But they have a buyout option where they can buy out to up to 50% of that requirement, and then that buyout comes at $35 a foot on their buyout, and then that money can get funneled into a fund that the city and hopefully the NCA, which we're going to create for the site, will control to fund larger public spaces, right? So there's a minimum that each developer is going to have to do, and then they can buy out a half of it, but they still have to build half of it. And then the buyout money, if they buy out, goes into a larger fund to help fund larger civic spaces. This is something we've done a lot of places, and it's worked really well for us around that. And the reason I go from 15 to 100 is because under 15,000 square feet, we allow people to buy out of 100%, because once you get under a 1,500 square foot civic space, it becomes more onerous to that size development than is helpful to creating civic spaces. And then once you get over 100,000 square feet, we allow you to buy out of only 50% up to 100,000 square feet, and then incrementally you can buy out of 100% of everything above 100,000 square feet. So remember, a 100,000 square foot site would be required to provide 10,000 square feet of civic space on their site, but they could buy out at half. So they could provide a 5,000 square foot beautiful plaza or civic space, and then provide 5,000 times $35 a foot in funds that can go into our civic space fund. Okay, so that's civic spaces. Transportation and accessibility. I'll skip forward to the parking. So we have, you know, different parking standards, obviously, for all the uses. We're going with like walkable urban parking standards, like 1 space per residential unit, and you can get sharing. And we're trying to be pretty aggressive with the parking requirements. A lot of the parking will be hidden surface and interior of the blocks in the beginning, I would imagine. Then eventually we'll move to a structured parking. But we do allow for parking buyout at $20,000 per space. And again, that money can go into a fund that can help fund public parking garages over time, right? So let's keep going. Street typology is a huge piece of everything that we do. So what does the street look like? So like you can see on the left, this is our A3 street. And this street has, you know, a cycle track on your right-hand side against the curb, you know, parallel parking, 2-way traffic, and then another curb, right? So, you know, this is one of our street typologies. And you'll see on the kind of right-hand side, we have another street typology, which is a much slower travel interior road because it's got shared bicycle and car traffic and angled parking, right, on the inside the travelway. So we have all these different street typologies that we designate for each street. And we spent a lot of time actually with your transportation committee and their chair on changing these street typologies with their comments to come to the place where we are today, which we find are going to be really great, walkable, vibrant, but still move traffic streets. All right. So I want to just like talk about the as of right approval process and timeline. So I just want to be like 100% clear about this, okay? The purpose of this type of zoning and our process is to create a highly investable environment, right? So what helps create a highly investable environment is setting up these things so that they're as of right conditions. So we don't believe that people should be able to come in here. It's not going to be prohibited, but we are pushing that people can't come in here and ask for a variance on our code, right? And the reason is because in theory, they can use the S1 zoning and ask for a variance under the S1 zoning. But you are using the optionality to opt into our overlay zoning, so you should follow the rules of that road, right? So with that process and tying all this tax abatement work that I'm doing to it, we're trying to create this highly investable environment, because if people would have wanted to build on Severance and it was such an easy thing to get done, it would have gotten done in the past. So the way we do this is create this really expedited as of right approval process connected to our code and following the code for this, as of right, approach. And we've set up a process with Eric and Karen and the team that we're proposing that we think will attract that. And it's very similar to places we've worked elsewhere. And so the way that the process is being proposed is that there's a technical advisory committee, which will be made up of boards and some of the staff, heads of staff, and it'll be led by the zoning administrator, which is currently Eric. And that TAC will get the first bite at looking at someone's proposed project. So they will come in with a proposed concept and a project. They'll have a meeting with the TAC. The TAC will talk to them about what they like and what they don't like, what they see and what they don't see, and how it seems to be lining up with the existing overlay zoning that they're opting into. Then there'll be a second meeting with the TAC where it's like much more of an in-depth submission, right? And we have this timeline on feedback for the TAC to keep the process from the TAC from when they submit their second time. And then eventually, once you get through that second pre-submission meeting with the TAC, then you get into your official submission of site plan process, which basically starts with an official submission that is distributed, that starts a clock with the TAC and the ABR, right, to look at it, and they have a 20-day period. Then eventually that goes, those comments go over to the Planning Commission, and then we're asking the Planning Commission to review those comments within 30 days and then have 45 days to actually make a decision. So we're trying to total up a process here where it allows post those steps 1 and 2 of the pre-meetings. When the official process starts, we're looking to have a max total time frame of 95 days to get your site plan approved. That's not your permit set necessarily or your building permit. You might have to do all your detailed floor plans and designs, but it is your site civil work and your conceptual floor plans and your conceptual elevations and all the stuff that we would see normally in a site civil submission. We're trying to target that for a 95-day process to, again, expedite and attract people to come and invest and develop on this site. Okay, I'm done. I'm sorry. That was like a lot. Hopefully that was helpful. Come back to my go-to meeting.
Brian, can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
that's much better. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. That was excellent. I want to just check in with you. How much time do you have? Because I have some questions and I imagine the commissioners might have some questions.
I have till 8, so
Okay.
so I have time. I didn't know how much you wanted to give me of your agenda. So
well, we had a few things taken off the agenda, so
okay,
it's
cool.
But so let me just start off with one question that I've heard a lot, and I have the same question myself. We talk a lot about how this might take 20 to 25 years to fully develop Severance. We've seen other developments in other municipalities take shape, different sizes, acknowledging, thinking about Van Aken or other areas. Give us some rationale, or what is the concern, or what is the reasoning behind why you're expecting this to be taking 20 to 25 years, even if we do have the right zoning in place?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I try to be conservative in my estimates, right? So let's be 100% clear about that, right? So I like to promise, the sky and produce the universe, right? So I always try to be a little bit conservative in how a build out time frame is going to be. So could it be faster? Of course it could be faster. I don't know how much faster absorption is going to be than we're projecting, but we did a residential and a retail study, right, that gave us an absorption time frame, right? So that absorption time frame is like a very real time frame of what we think can get absorbed every year. And when you think about how long a development takes, I guess it's, you know better than most of the community, but developments take a while, right? If we were going to do, 5 buildings with 280 units and 15,000 square feet of development in phase 1A, right? That alone is it's a 24 to 30 month process, right? By the time you get a permit in place, you break ground and you finish construction, it's an 18 to 24 month build for a 4 to 5 story stick frame over retail type building with parking behind and all that kind of stuff, right? So it just takes time. So when I map all this out in my project schedule in reality to see how all this stuff can actually get done and built out, and I combine that with the absorption, and then I get conservative by like 20% just to be safe, that's where I land. That doesn't mean that it can't go faster or I don't want it to go faster, right? Like there's no reason in the world anybody would want it to take longer, right? We always want it to go faster. And maybe it catches, fire and it just starts taking off. But I'm trying to be conservative, and I'm forgetting off the top of my head the name of the development to the west of downtown Cleveland.
Crocker Park.
Crocker Park, right? Crocker Park was done over most of it, from my understanding, was done over like a 12 to 14 year period. But in reality, the whole thing didn't get finished for almost 20 years. So I think that people, the scale of what we're talking about is very large. Again, like we looked at phase 1A, which is just the upper corner of this site, and that's about 50% of the size of Van Aken alone, right? So, it doesn't have to take that long. There's no rule that it takes that long. This is a market-driven process. If the market wants it, it will get built, right? Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes. Another macro question is, I know you said you're 18 months into your 20 months in terms of proof of concept for NAMDAR. So just clarify for us where the zoning overlay fits into that process and how we move from this all being very conceptual to actually transitioning to attracting developer, the actual execution of this, because that, as I understand it, is not assured, right? There has to be some sort of decision point by NAMDAR. So can you just give us a little sense of that and how the zoning overlay fits in?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to get into the nitty gritty for a second of our deal, NAMDAR and my deal, just so you can understand it, but I'll try to be as layman as possible. Because it is a little bit complicated, but the reality is in the simplest terms, I got 20 months from NAMDAR to get 2 things accomplished. Okay, 2 base things. 1, approvals in place, and approvals is what we're doing right now. All the zoning and the regulations in place. And then 2 is to codify that I've created the land value, call it $10 per unit, whatever we want to use the metric is, right? We agreed to a number, right? They wanted 20, I wanted 2, we agreed to a number of land value, right? And the thesis is that the new zoning and this setup and attaching an as-of-right development setup to a tax abatement structure that's pre-approved by the school district and the city, and everything getting set up in this nice, pretty package, right, will attract investment and development. And this has been very successful for us in multiple municipalities. The best of which I always mention, which people may or may not like, is the city of New Rochelle in New York, right? Like it created mass amount of investment really quick through this as of right condition. Now the economics are different in New Rochelle than they are in Cleveland Heights. So I'm very realistic about that, but I'm also trying to tailor, the typologies, tax abatements, and the structures to Cleveland Heights economics, right? So I agreed with them that 1, I had to get those approvals in place in that 20 months. And 2, I had to codify or prove that I've created that land value, right? And how do you create that land value or prove you're going to create that land value? Well, you prove it by investors or construction lenders or equity investors or development sponsors that partner with us saying, yes, we will give you credit at that land value in the partnership, right? And then if I hit those numbers, then NAMDAR is forced to contribute the land in as part of the development, right? Now, remember, the land is usually only somewhere between 10 and 20% of the total cost of a development. So, the person who puts in the other 80% is going to be the one controlling the development, whether they're my partner or, it's NRP or I don't know, Flaherty Collins. Like I'll just name developers that you guys know, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, I have to achieve those two things: the approvals in place, and I have to create the value that I agreed post approvals in place. And what I'm saying is that in order to create that value, the approvals have to be in place and the tax abatements have to be, structure has to be set up, because people have to know how that's going to work. I was hoping to accomplish all of that by February 15 or whatever my deadline is. I am not going to, but I have done a lot, and we all have done a lot. But I do think we can get the zoning approved this year. And I've told NAMDAR, hey, I think we're going to get the zoning then this year. And then I'm going to have to come back to you. I'm going to need more time for the tax abatement structuring stuff and to bring in the first phase of development. But I'm not going to be asking for like a year. I'm going to be saying, okay, yeah, I have till February, give me till June or something, right? And let's get the rest of this stuff done. So, and I'm talking to the COO every week. Like they're very cognizant of this. They know that like we're making great progress. So I'm not concerned about it all. And frankly, it's my risk, because actually at the end of the day, if you adopt this zoning code, which I think is great, and I think your planning department does think is good, you guys get the benefit of the zoning being in place on my dime and my time, basically, right? So, and the rules are the rules. Like they can't change the rules once you guys adopt the rules, once the city adopts the rules. So I think, focusing on the fact that we're trying to get this code done and then moving into the next phase of getting the tax abatements done will allow us to then be in a position where we can bring in the first phase investment and development, which again, I'm hoping will put us in a position where we're in full design of the initial buildings in 26 to hopefully break ground at the end of 26, beginning of 27. Was that make sense explanation wise?
Yes, I think so. For me, at least, in terms of the overlay, so we've just done a development plan for Park Synagogue. S1 for Severance is its own zoning district. Anyway, can you just talk to us about the interplay, because you had mentioned at the outset of sharing with us that developers could choose which zoning. So that will be new for us, I think, in the city. We don't have that anywhere else. So what are the advantages of that? What are the disadvantages of that? And why are you proposing that here?
Yeah. So the concept is that, remember, NAMDAR doesn't control every site in that boundary. Okay. So the boundary is set up to include both the inside of the circle and the outside of the circle, right? Because if Severance Circle is going to be a place, you don't want it to be a great place on the inside and not such a great place on the outside, right? So when we create the zoning boundary, we capture both sides of the circle, which includes properties we don't control, right? So we're not trying to impose, like, for example, the medical arts building that everybody sees on the circle that's kind of empty, like whatever,
yep.
Everyone knows what I'm talking about. That, we don't control that building. Some doctor in California owns that building, right? But we want to encourage that doctor in California to use our zoning. So we're not going to force him to take the Severance overlay district. But what we are saying to him is it's an option, if you don't like your S1 zoning, to opt into it. And guess what you get if you opt into that zoning? You get an expedited approval process. You get a set up tax abatement process. You get to be part of the game, right? So we do that specifically in places so that we're not forcing zoning upon private property owners. We're encouraging them to play in the game. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Okay, I have some nitty gritty questions, but I've already taken up a lot of time. Any questions from the commissioners specifically for Ryan while we have him? Just make sure the mic is on, otherwise he won't.
Mic is on? Yep. Can we get the electronic version of all that stuff you showed us?
Yeah, sure. I'll send the PowerPoint. Now, keep in mind that there are some moving target tweaks, like on that regulating plan map. We're still tweaking some of where the red lines are, where retail is going to be, and so there's a little bit of moving pieces.
On the whole thing. There you go.
He said just label it preliminary, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And remember, you guys are going to get the full package, obviously, too.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
it on? Oh, it's on. Okay, great. I have more to say than I'm going to say because I don't want to take up too much time. But so I'm going to focus on just a few questions. But by the way, I do want to start by saying that your basic concept of taking what was probably a good idea at the time, which was the first enclosed shopping mall in the state of Ohio, and turning it into what makes sense today, a more pedestrian-oriented mixed-use place, makes a lot of sense. And I think that that big change is huge and is going in the right direction. I'll just ask you a few specific questions. I think some people get turned off, as you heard, when you talk about the overall number of years it's going to take to build this. Can you also say, okay, what's likely to happen in the first 5 years? So people don't say, oh my goodness, 25 years, I can't wait that long, I'll be dead. You know, I will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great
I'm 70.
You're not going to be dead, but I will. I'm happy to answer the question. So look, if you remember that, and I can like go back to graphics, but if you remember that big phase 1 area, which is basically everything on the north and south side of the Walmart and the movie theater, right?
Right.
That area alone, I think, is probably the first 7 to 10 years, and that's huge. I mean, that area alone, I think, is programmed as 850 units, and it's probably like, you know, half to a third of the total other program, right? So retail, office availability, institutional, like I can't, you know, I don't know exactly the mix that's going to be built there, but that in and of itself is a massive area and a massive amount of development that is probably 3 to 4x Van Aken, right? So yeah. I think you're going to see a lot. And remember, as you're kind of pointing out, you know, we have to create place right away, right? Like we can't like build something and be like, don't worry, it'll come in 10 years, right? Like that, we have to actually like lease and sell and, you know, these spaces, right? So we are thinking very critically about how each component of this project creates place, right? Maybe it's a little place at start, but it's somewhere where you feel like you can go and park and go to dinner, and some people live there and some people work there, and then it's a bigger space, and then it gets expanded. And how do we mix that with tearing down old buildings, right? So it's the complexity of that equation, right, is kind of in the nitty gritty of what I'm going to have to do every day after we get all this stuff adopted. It's not part of the zoning, right? Because the zoning can't regulate the time that people tear things down or how long it takes to get a construction loan or any of that stuff that the market controls.
Right. So I'm just saying, whenever you mention something like 25 years, it would be good to also say, first 5 years, most likely this, next 5 years, most likely this. So people don't say 25 years. Oh, come on, you know. Okay,
yeah.
So
fair enough. I'm trying really hard to like do the magnitude, but I will heed your advice on the how I say it.
Number two, I think one of the real surprising omissions from the original severance plan, although it was understandable because it was an enclosed mall, was outdoor gathering spaces. You go there now, it's all buildings and parking lots. There's no place for people to kind of hang out. You go to Van Aken District, you know, that area where everyone sits and eats, also right outside of the Mitchell's ice cream. People go there, especially in the good weather, because they want to hang out and they want to socialize. And Severance has never had that. And changing it from an enclosed mall, which of course it had, but it was inside. Now there's no longer an enclosed mall. It makes sense to take that enclosed gathering space and make it an outdoor gathering space. And I think that's an important part of what should happen here and should be thought through. The only other thing I'll say is I'm hoping that at a certain point in time, the commission members will be able to see your draft regulations. I realize it has to go through staff first, and that's perfectly understandable. But, you know, we're anxious to see those things too.
Yeah, let me give you the very detailed response to that.
Yeah.
We're submitting this code next week. It will be accepted, hopefully, by council on the 3rd. It'll be referred to the Planning Commission that evening. There'll be a public hearing scheduled for December 2nd. You will have a meeting where I will come, I think, on November 12th, where you will have that couple of weeks to look at the code, and then we can talk about it that whole meeting. And then there's going to be a combination meeting between the council again and the Planning and Economic Development Committee. and then you're going to provide your comments along the way, and then we're hopefully going to get some comments at the public hearing on December 2nd. All is going to culminate into that next 2 weeks of us making adjustments to the code before a vote happens, yay or nay, by the council on December 15th. So yes,
Yes,
you
that's
are
great.
in the process. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And I'll stop there, other than to say, whenever, if anyone ever uses the term Euclidean zoning in a negative way, remember that we in the Cleveland area are home to the city of Euclid, where that created that, whose court case created that term. So we have some affection for the word.
I need to be careful with that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
our vice chair has a couple questions.
I've got one question. With Brian, with your experience with working with these kind of development proposals, do you envision, like, for example, building off Bob's question of what's going to happen in the first 5-7 years, that you could actually have multiple developers working on different parcels in that first phase, where somebody's on lot 3, somebody else is on 7, somebody's on 8, moving
Yes.
the project along quite rapidly?
That is what you literally hit the nail on the head with the goal here, right? Like, the goal is again, remember, and I hate to like equate this to a game, but like, we're setting up a chessboard, right? And we're making it really easy for all these people to come in and play the game, but we've already set up the rules, right? So we know that they can't do something that's out of the box of the rules, but we're trying to make it easy for them to play the game. So yes, my hope is that we're out there and we have, market rate player multifamily, condo player B. We have institution that we're talking to, maybe an educational institution that's C. We have, retail players that come in as ground floor mixed use. So we're trying to talk to this wide array of developers. Like, remember, we have this SO3 district that's in the bottom right-hand corner that'll get adopted, which is focused on like cottage courts, right? And smaller, like, still walkable, but, more single family type product, right? As it approaches Milliken and where it like addresses and touches the single family neighborhood. Maybe somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to do that right now, right? That's what I want to invest in. And that's great. And they can come in and do that. They don't have to wait for me to do up near the movie theater, right? So yes, is the answer, your long answer to your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well,
It's on. Would you hazard a guess or an estimate of the value of the development? In other words, will it be $1 billion by the time it's all done in 2025 dollars?
I don't have the answer, and I don't want to throw that out right now. I could tell you right now, I'm at roughly 3 million square feet of development. So if you're at an average of $300 per foot, you're at $900 million bucks. It's probably a little less than that. But yeah, this is I can tell you it's over a $750 million worth of entitlement that's in place, right? Whether all of it gets built or not, I won't know, right? I can't control the market.
Thank you.
Mr. Miles.
Hi. So my question concerns some of the ideas you got at the various public forums and outreach efforts you've been doing over the past year or two.
Yeah.
Some of them were repeatedly around like destination recreation or leisure type uses. Do you still see any of those uses being viable for any phase of the developments or multiple phases? And if so, which ones do you think still might have a chance with development, or which ones probably won't?
Yeah, so I would like to, so land costs money, right? And I have this deal with NAMDAR, and I got to make this deal work with NAMDAR to get this thing going. Otherwise, we're stuck with you guys. It's just NAMDAR. It'll just be the mall, right? Mm-hmm. So the way I set these things up is that civic space and that public open space and that programmed recreational space is, again, a requirement of each development to provide this 10% of their site area. And when you do that, my experience is that people program that space, right? as was discussed, it becomes a gathering space. Maybe the site area becomes 5,000 square feet and they put like, I don't know, 2 pickleball courts on it. I don't know, right? But like, I can't control each one of those things today. But what we are doing is we're forcing civic space as part of each development. And when you don't want to do all of it, you have to pay into a fund that can then help fund the bigger park and civic space and recreational space, right? So that's how we kind of set these structures up as directly related to the civic space. On a more broad base, the crowdsourcing effort and the ideas campaign that's on the crowdsourcing website, that is built so that once we get past the zoning and past the tax abatement structuring and we start bringing in developers and investors, we now have this stable of ideas that's supported by the community, right? That we can do feasibility analysis on as to whether it's actually financially feasible for that coffee shop to be there, or for a hotel to be developed, or for, you know, whatever the idea may be, right? But that's the reason we collect those ideas, because over this, and I'll say the sacrilegious number, 20 to 25 years, right? Needs will change, right? So over the first 5 years, some people might love this idea, right? And maybe we get that idea implemented, right? This music venue, right? And then maybe in year 10 through 12, when we're halfway through the site, people love this idea. And we prove the feasibility of this idea, and we bring that in. So it's a democratized way of collecting ideas of uses from the community, that when ideas reach the top over time and get more support, we can then look at the feasibility of that use. But that's not codified in the code, because the code allows all those uses already, right? So the code's already saying, yeah, bring it on. The question is whether the financial and feasibility will allow for it. Does that make sense?
It does.
And just to follow up on that, Ryan, because we only have a few minutes left, what if, you know, because you had indicated and you had said that what is proposed is not necessarily going to be. So what happens if we do have a developer that comes in and says, hey, I want to build really large single family homes in one of these areas?
No, they couldn't do that. So I want to be clear.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is my concept plan is not exactly what would be built, right?
Okay.
But the zoning doesn't allow for single family homes, okay? So you opt into the zoning, and if you're in the SO1 district, you have a minimum of 3 stories, a maximum of, you know, 8 stories if you have the 30,000 square foot site, the development standard number 1, and you have to build the building up to the street. You have to provide a certain distance from the curb. You have to provide a clearway. You have to provide private frontage space. You have to make sure 70% of the storefront or the first floor is glazing. You have to make a certain percentage of that retail. So, you know, it's like the parking has to be hidden behind. So the regulations will dictate the form of these buildings to create this walkable space, right? But what I'm saying is that just because I have building A shaped like building A doesn't mean building A is going to be shaped like building A, right?
Right. Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Wilbig.
The current, looking at the current S1 zoning with the height being largely dispersed around the outside of the ring, and the proposed now core center, which would have the highest density kind of at the center at that north-south orientation, would you imagine there being any conflict, or is there any conflict in that existing height should someone on the outside want to opt in? You know, that would then restrict their height. Would it be lower than the current, or is it about the same?
No, it's lower. So, so like the large apartment buildings that are about 8 stories now, where they sit right now in the overlay zone is 5-story max, right? Because we think that that's more appropriate. The probability of those apartment buildings shutting down and closing down to redevelop is pretty small, right? So at least until they like get out of their useful life. But again, at that point in time, they can go through the arduous process of trying to get the S1 zoning done and rebuilding something that's 8 stories or whatever, or they can opt into our code and do 5 stories and actually build the building up to Severance Circle, or build it against Mayfield so it's got better urbanity, right, and walkability. So unfortunately, obviously, we can't change what's there, right? But we're trying to develop this code so that if it changes in the future, it's more appropriate to what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, well, it's 8 o'clock and we don't want to keep you longer. So thank you very much, Ryan. We'll, I think we may have some questions for staff right now, but we'll let you go. And thank you so much for all your time tonight. We really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you guys so much. And I'm sorry that it's a lot of information. We're doing our best to kind of mull it down into the important components of it. And we have plenty of time to talk. Like, people can call me, whatever the rules of the road are. I don't know for who can contact me when and where, but like, I want to answer every question I can over the next couple of weeks. And I want to just push the ball forward. I'm really excited about working with you all. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Have a good night, Brian.
Bye.
We're okay? Okay. Just some questions for staff process wise. This is new, but it's also very big in terms of impact on the city and certainly an area that we have been looking at for many years. Because is that the only mic that works? Okay. Can you just help all of us understand so we're prepared what council, because usually we shape things and then we refer it with a recommendation to council. This is starting at council. So just walk us through the. No.
There we go. Now it's on. Sorry, I forgot yours. Your mics work differently. All zoning amendments always begin with council passing this legislation and then referring it back to council. Now when we do our annual zoning review, we start something and send it to them, but it doesn't always start that way. It can start with council and then they refer over to planning commission. So that's the process. Attached to your agenda should have been the revised agenda that we sent out to everybody. Yep. Is a time frame for as of this moment, what we think will be the public meetings around this new zoning. So, tonight was just a beginning discussion around what form-based code is. I have a YouTube video that I'm going to send the link to each of you. I think it's about a 10-minute video just around what form-based code is. I think it helps for those of us that are not as familiar with what form-based code is and what it's trying to achieve. It's just a different way of regulating the land and the uses. So I think it helps put it into perspective. And then, once this is introduced to council, they literally are tweaking everything as we speak. So there's not a good draft that we could even share with you today because half of it's been changed. And the danger in sending out drafts is that everybody gets confused because you get focused in on this topic and then it's been pulled out completely and you've wasted all your time. So as soon as we have the draft that's been submitted to council and they're going to enter it into legislation and refer it to us, we can share that with you so that you can begin looking at it. And it's a good document. It's very readable. There's lots of illustrations so that you can understand because it is form-based code. So often with form-based code, there's more graphics to help you understand it. Along with this, staff is looking at our regular zoning code because we need to tweak some areas in the S1 so that it's clear what's happening with the overlay. And as you know, with the S1, we have the inner core. There's a preliminary land use plan for Severance, and this preliminary land use plan allows anything that's a multifamily 3 or a C3 commercial on the inner ring. But on the outer ring, so on the outside of the core of Severance Circle, you're allowed to have a multifamily 3 or a C1 office use. Our zoning code doesn't make that clear. So we're trying to clean up our code a little bit so that if you stay under the S1, it's clear as to what you're staying under. And then when so we're checking and balancing as we go. And because they're trying to make this code, they really do want to get this code right. Things get tweaked. So as they tweak something, then we have to go back and look at some of the other sections and see how we have to interplay them.
And I guess my question is also about the interplay between council and the planning commission. Will we be able to actually recommend significant changes.
Absolutely, just like any process, once it comes to us, the intent of the planning commission is to review the code, to make recommendation for changes, to hear from the public, and based on some of that, you may want to make some additional recommendations. And then goes back to council, and they will hold a public hearing from council, which again, the public is invited to speak to, and they could, based on public input at that point, make some tweaks again. So I think what gets introduced may not be what they then would review at the public hearing. For example, if planning commission made some recommendations for changes, they may be looking at those recommendations as part of that legislation. So the legislation can get tweaked as it moves through the time and the process.
That makes sense. I'm sorry.
Oh, just to say,
No, turn it.
okay, I understand your question about the timing relationship between the city planning commission process and the council process. I know I hate to keep referring back, but during my time in Cleveland, it's true that when a zoning code amendment and ordinance was ready to be introduced, yes, it starts at council and then gets referred to a planning commission, but the preparation of that zoning code amendment typically started within the planning commission and the planning staff. And once that draft was finalized, then it would be given to council as something that they could introduce as a zoning code amending ordinance. But like you're saying, our process was, it starts with the planning commission and the staff and stays there until it's ready to be transmitted to council as an ordinance, which is kind of, okay, this is what we've come up with. And now it becomes a public process. So I understand not every city handles that relationship between drafting of the code and planning commission versus council and staff. So it's handled in different ways. And I'm not familiar with the way it's done here as opposed to how it's done in the city of Cleveland, but I'm sure both ways happen.
And my, another reason why I was asking is because Ryan referenced studies that he based the proportion of retail, housing, things like that were completed. Can we have that sent to us also? Because it's certainly, we can take him at his word, but if there's a feasibility study or
I'll have to talk to him about that. I don't know how many of those studies he's had done and how lengthy each of them are.
Okay. I misunderstood. I thought it was something that we had done as the city that he was working off of. You're saying that Impact had done those studies that he's basing the balancing on?
Let me double check and see what we have.
Yeah. I think because this goes to a larger macro question that we hear, and this is probably, again, one of the biggest developments we'll be looking at, is we look at this one by one. We don't look at it holistically as a city. And now we have mixed use at Top of the Hill. We have Cedarly, Meadowbrook, and now we're going to have Severance. And he mentioned, I think, what's becoming a little bit of a dirty word, like first floor retail. And I'm concerned. I want to understand how we can know better what the best and highest use is that's actually going to be
and I think you need
interesting to developers.
Right. And I think you need to see the whole plan, because retail in his mind is meaning there's glass and it's available to the public. So there's multiple uses
there too, but anticipating a lot of the public conversation on this, it's going to be, if we're thinking about building single family homes on empty lots, why aren't we using this as an opportunity to build a single family development like in South Euclid? Or if we're looking at, needing first floor aging in place, why are we looking at first floor retail in an apartment building? And so I want us to be equipped with whatever information we need to be able to answer those questions. But I also think that that's something that the public, deserves to understand better without working on assumptions that people are just bandying about, in this what will be a very long but good process.
And I certainly relate to that, because I've known a fair number of people who have left Cleveland Heights because they were getting older and needed to have first floor master bedrooms, but they still wanted a single house or even a townhouse, not an apartment building. And they just don't, we just don't have that here. And they left town.
We have a lot of anecdotal evidence flying around about what we need or don't need. We don't have a lot of empirical evidence or studies, at least that have been available to the public or available to decision makers. And I think if we have that during this process, we can act more confidently as we move forward. And it does seem, I will say, I'm pleased to see a number of opportunities for both us and council to consider things before we officially make a recommendation at the end of the process. So that's
And
very
this
positive.
was presuming, planning commission always has between 30 and 60 days. So obviously if, you're not ready to make a decision, we can always have a special meeting too, which we have done before with big decisions. So that didn't anticipate that, but that doesn't preclude it. So I just wanted to remind you that, should we need a second meeting where we can have more discussion between commissioners or there's always that option also. So, just one more thing, as you'll see when you get the full plan, and Ryan made mention of it, there is a segment of that where they were recommending some smaller cottage style single floor living, which could be really fun and interesting. So I think that's something that may spark the imagination of the public.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions for staff? Yeah, go ahead.
I was struggling to understand how existing buildings were taking into consideration
So you mean existing?
in the proposed blocks and density.
So yeah, so I think that the design, I think when the buildings were of quality and could be perhaps reused, they could. Most of what's on the interior is not of that caliber, which is why he's recommending redevelopment.
But just if we have the sustainability guidelines that start with exploring existing buildings, it just seems a little counterintuitive that there doesn't seem to be that tie-in to considering specifically large apartment towers that would, should there be pressure on them, be displacing hundreds of people. So it's existing buildings plus people.
So no, if there's buildings that are existing
In the
that
future.
are still in use, they would still remain, just like anywhere else in the city, it would remain as
Rezoning
is.
changes how land use and value
But
impacts it.
however, they don't have to opt in. This is an optional.
That's how they
So
get out of
The existing, anything that's existing can stay as they are under the S1 zoning and remain forever, should they want to do it that way.
Like the gas stations.
But the zoning map
Well-
as proposed doesn't show them as existing.
I think that was confusing to me a little bit, and maybe this is feedback for Ryan, where they show development where Metro Health is right now or next to it. It would just be helpful to indicate on the graphics what is an existing building that we expect to
And
stay
I think that
versus-
when he does his actual presentation, there will be an overlay of his zoning on a aerial so that we can see
Yeah.
existing buildings. I think that was some comment that he heard from.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
somebody
I
else.
think
And, I'm sure that most of the existing buildings will remain. The mid to high-rise apartments aren't going to go anywhere. Now,
Norris City Hall, probably.
maybe it should. Now the Spectrum site is something else.
Right.
That was originally Spectrum's offices and other things. Now it's really just trucks from what I see. They've moved their office out to the Golden Gate area now. So I've been there. And so I wonder if that really is a use that makes a lot of sense now. It's mostly a lot of trucks parked there.
As with any zoning code, should they opt in, this provides them greater flexibility and more opportunity to redevelop in a way that probably would have a greater return than what they currently have.
Right, but my point is if there was a decision made planning wise, that's not an optimum use that's there right now, then of course the zoning, which doesn't force a change, but saying if there is a change, this is what we'd like to see on that site in the future, recognizing that the existing use is a,
They've just invested in that property, so I don't think they're going anywhere soon, Bob. Sorry.
but there's not much there. It's a lot of truck parking and a crappy building, So, okay.
Okay, anything else on this? Okay, so just to wrap up, it would be helpful to whatever material, the form-based video that you mentioned, whatever studies that Ryan or the planning staff can identify that were inputs to the proportions that are going to be recommended and any other information that planning staff thinks that we should have, as we enter into this process. I think the earlier we could get that out to the entire commission, the better, so we could be prepared, because our meeting this month is a little bit later than normal because of the Jewish holidays. So we have less time, till
Right, and this, of course, is dependent on the impact to submit their request
The
for
council,
a
right.
rezoning. Right. So that's what's starting all of this, is their request to council for a rezoning.
Okay, excellent. I have one other piece of new business since we're on technically new business. You might have noticed we're being recorded and videotaped. We have made progress in this area. In speaking with Mayor Kuda and the planning staff, we were not able to get live streamed tonight, which was my original request, live stream and recorded, but definitely have agreement that these meetings, particularly because of the matters of import that we are considering, will be recorded like this. And Mayor Kuda has assured me that they are working within staff. Part of the problem is there's only one staff member that does the live stream / recording, and they are working on figuring out how they might do that. So this will be recorded. We will just get final confirmation that this can be posted to the website, but that was certainly the intent of recording this tonight, if not live streamed, that it would be available for future viewing. And so I just want to congratulate all of us on moving after many years of asking for this. We're moving in the right direction. So
Great.
Very exciting, particularly because I do think that these will be of tremendous interest to the public.
There are a lot of people who are, I'm sorry.
No, it was on. Just get closer.
Thank you. There are a lot of people, I'll get it eventually.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who are interested, but don't really want to take the time to actually come in person and sit here. But if it were available, on their computer or their smart TV, they would be watching.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. So with that, let's go backwards to old business. And I believe planning staff, you put two matters on the agenda. So we would want to start with the conditional use permit review.
And Justin, if you want to jump in on this one too, you're more than welcome to. So what we had discussed with Planning Commission was just process for conditional use permits that need to be reviewed. What we have determined after further investigation and deliberation is that we are taking conditional uses that are not conforming to the zoning regulations to court first. We feel like this will establish they will either then come into compliance or it will establish a pattern of non-compliance that then can be used as part of the record should we have to review them more seriously through Planning Commission. Did I skip over anything, Justin?
That's accurate. And just to say that'll lay a foundation for you that you will have a history that a court has weighed in and ruled that, yes, we believe that this company is out of compliance. So I guess you can just have more confidence in the choices that you guys make.
So I think this is interesting because it's indicative of the conversation we had, I think at the last meeting or the meeting before, where the commission actually asked staff to explore in lieu of moving right to a conditional use permit revocation. Are there other legal avenues that we could take? I guess my question for Justin is this a civil proceeding? It's a criminal proceeding? What is the mechanism? What is the cause of action that the city's bringing?
Treat it like a crime. Can you hear me? Because I think it's off.
No, it's on. You just have to be close. Yeah.
I think it's still off. Or
No, that's on.
Okay, yeah.
No, Justin, it's not on. You have to come back here. Sorry.
It is on. It was on. He just has to be
You
close.
can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Just talk right into the mic.
Yes. So it would go through the normal court process like a crime would. And the second part of that was what?
What cause of action? Like what is the,
It would be a housing court violation case.
so it's a misdemeanor?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Now, this is probably an ignorant question, but I assume before it goes to court,
Mhm.
there would be an administrative action taken to let the property owner know you seem to be out of compliance
Mhm.
and giving them the opportunity to respond and to maybe get into compliance before you take them to court.
Well, that's
Right,
what
there's a
Xavier's
site.
been
Oh,
doing for,
sorry.
no, that's what Xavier has been doing for quite some time. I think it would come after, well, I guess the question is, it would come after the second violation?
Right.
The citation and then the inspection.
I got it. Okay. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't. go to
No,
court
you
first.
just don't jump there, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Anytime,
process.
anytime there's a zoning violation, we first reach out to try to educate the violator
Yeah.
about what the zoning is and ways that they can come into compliance. It's only when it's clear that they're not interested or not able to take any action to correct the non-compliance that then we would have to take that next step,
Great.
which would be to send.
That
them
makes
to
sense.
court.
I just didn't hear
It's
that,
a
but
step.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Process and then bringing them back here would be the final step.
Okay, well, I think that that's an excellent development, and I think it reflects also the recommendation of the commission to explore other avenues. So that's really appreciated. Okay, our favorite topic, annual zoning code review.
So I know that, and I have a handout I can share with you about the timetables that we think we're looking at now. And I know that you had a meeting. Let me just take. Can I get you to give this to each or here? Could you pass that to each of the commissioners just so they have it?
You
Sorry,
can
it says-
talk and pass it out.
It says, yeah, if I leave this mic,
Right,
you
you
can't hear
right,
me,
we won't
then
hear you.
which will not- So as you know, we want to have our zoning code reviewed and we have a timetable. Part of what the planning staff would like to do is we want to issue a request for proposal to review the zoning code. That's part of what I had discussed at our last meeting in my PowerPoint presentation. We actually have the request for proposal ready. We're hoping that we can release it this week, possibly as early as tomorrow, with responses to come back in November or December. We are hoping that then we can have council pass legislation allowing us to enter into contract with them by the end of the year. The idea would be that by the second quarter, there could be early action items, which potentially could include consideration of the places of worship, and have that formal zoning amendment process be pulled out of the balance of the other zoning code issues we're having them look at. And so that it can be pulled out and moved forward as an early action item. And that, of course, would happen after discussion with obviously Planning Commission, but also the administration, the mayor and council, so that they're comfortable with moving that forward at that time.
Yeah, I just want to provide a little bit more context because I met this Monday, actually that was yesterday. It seems like it was a long time ago, but that was yesterday. Monday morning with Director Zamt and Mayor Kuda joined us for the beginning of the meeting, as well as Law Director Bill Hanna and our Assistant Law Director, Justin. And this RF, as we all know, our zoning code is woefully out of date. And for the last few years, under Eric and Karen's leadership, we have been trying to, bit by bit with annual zoning code review, move it forward. It's clear that it's taking a very long time, and we have big ticket items like houses of worship, the ADUs, tiny homes, maybe ADUs are the same thing, but we have these big ticket items that we have not been able to really get to or complete. And so it was staff's recommendation to move towards hiring a consultant through this RFP to do it sort of a comprehensive process that we will have an independent third party guide us through, that will take away any, sense of the fact that planning or council is moving things forward, kind of under the rug, which we haven't been, but now we're recording our meetings and things like that. So just want to give it more legitimacy, more expertise into the process, more staff, more bandwidth, right? Because we have a small but mighty staff. So an outside consultant will give us more bandwidth to manage this in important ways,
right,
and have us on a timetable that we can actually tackle, I think, a lot of really important issues that we've been trying to do here.
Right, and this process includes public engagement so that there's clean and clear engagement opportunities. So, and just let me say that, currently we already have been working on accessory dwelling units. As you know, we have staff going around just as on a listening project in the community, and there's a flyer with dates, and Brooke may know them better than me because she's one of the staff helping to do this listening engagement. So that's kind of on its own track. And we have already hired someone to take a look at our landscape regulations in the zoning code because they were so complex that we often had landscape architects not clearly understanding what the zoning code was asking of them. So we knew we needed to have that looked at. And we also have a consultant currently working on our sign regulations, which were woefully out of date. So those are things that are happening now, but in addition to what this request for proposal would be looking at as we're going forward.
Yeah, and I was so pleased to hear about this. I did the RFP, which I'm still getting through, but I think that this is really going to allow us to modernize the zoning code with substantial public engagement, with the right outside expertise that we need, and added bandwidth for staff. And I just think that this has a real opportunity to really drive some important changes forward, but also for us to be able to consider them in the right way, in a very holistic way, which we haven't been able to do because of limitations on bandwidth, but also limitations on, from the administration, which I think are moving in the right direction now. So that's very exciting. What, anything else? So are we going to be doing, the one thing maybe I forgot to ask Director Zampt was, will we be doing like smaller annual code changes in December anyway? Or you're going to say you're thinking to put everything in this?
I think we need to put everything in this since we'll be working with a consultant. It would make sense.
Yeah.
To be holistic about it this year. And then, then we'll go back to our annual review because every year there'll be something that we've realized needs to be tweaked.
Yeah.
Or maybe we'll be at a position where we'll say, hey, this is great. We don't need to do any tweaking this year. Yeah, yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
And then certainly I'll invite on your behalf, Karen, but anybody who has questions on the timeline or anything, please feel free to email Erica and Karen.
Absolutely.
Congratulations to the staff on taking on this process of hiring a consultant and doing this comprehensively. That's a great move. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay.
All right. Sorry for that interlude. I just want to check with Commissioner Horowitz. Len told me a couple months ago, but I want to share with everyone that he is going to be retiring from the Planning Commission. December will be his last meeting. I don't know if everybody knows, but Len has been serving in some sort of public capacity for Cleveland Heights for 54 years. 54 years. So this is a big deal. He has been literally my right hand for the last 6 years, and certainly my friend and fellow commissioner. So there will be more. There will be more accolades coming your way. But I just wanted to let everybody know, prepare for December. And also this is an opportunity for us to share with council. I'll be letting Councilman Cobb know, who's the chair of the Administrative Services Committee, in the hopes that because we are undertaking this, that we can have fill the vacancy for our January meeting. So we'll give them a couple months to do that. So, but Len, just our initial hearty thank you, and how much we're going to miss you. I am going to miss you. I don't know who gets to move over to your seat, but I am certainly going to miss having you at my right side. What? No. Can we not let him retire? No, I think he's earned it. I think he's earned it. Of course, we'd love for him to stay, but you could probably take all 7 chairs if we could get replacements. So yeah, we wouldn't mind that. But thank you so much, Len. Okay, any other new business, old business? Okay, with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.